Oh, let America be America again. I am the poor white fool pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant gripping the hope I seek and finding only the same stupid plan of dog eat dog and mighty crush weak. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet and yet must be. The land where every man is free. The land that's mine. The poor man's, the Indians, immigrants, Negroes, me. Me who made America. Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Oh, let America be America again. That's Langston Hughes. It was written in 1935. It was published in 1936. So Donald Trump has proven himself to be an unwise copycat. And if he thought that he could get affirmation from the great Langston Hughes, maybe he should have read past the title. Because the America that Donald Trump is talking about is not the one that Langston Hughes is talking about. The America that Donald Trump is talking about is the one where you can enslave African peoples. The one where you can remove indigenous peoples from their land. The one where you can put Japanese Americans in internment camps. The one where it's okay to enact Jim Crow. The one where it's okay to choke and to shoot innocent black men. The one where it's okay to have immigrant children die after being put in cages. That's not the America Langston Hughes was talking about. And that's not the America that Beto O'Rourke. Beto has done something that all of us should look to be an example of. He has transformed himself from just another white guy running for president from Texas. And he has looked racism and white supremacy in the face. He has looked Islamophobia in the face. He has looked homophobia in the face. And he has taken the pain and the disgust and the anger that we rightfully have after the horrific events of August 3rd, 2019. And he has moved past all the prayers. And he has said, we are going to take action. And so the challenge that he has stepped up to, and he's going to tell you about tonight, is the challenge I want to give us as Tulsans. Because what happened August 3rd, 2019 was the worst act of hate crime since in 98 years. But 98 years ago, the worst one happened here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Tulsa Race Massacre. And so we have to be an example. We have to say no to having black Tulsans, having Latinx Tulsans, having LGBTQ Tulsans go through the same racist, white supremacist, hateful systems that they had to go through 98 years ago. We have to say yes to love and no to hate. Can we do that? Let's give it up for Beto O'Rourke.
Let's give it up for Greg Robinson.
Yeah!
That was so beautiful. Yeah! The land that never has been yet, and yet must be. That's what we are about today, and every day going forward. if this idea of America is ever going to work, if this ideal of America is ever going to be realized. 243 years ago, we very consciously set out to define ourselves not by race, not by ethnicity, not by religion, not by common ancestry. But this idea, again, it's all acknowledged, never realized in this country, but that we were all created equal. And until now, until this administration, at least we sought to form that more perfect union. It seems like at this moment, at least under this presidency, it's an open question whether that is still our goal, our foundational purpose, or the thing that we want to realize for everyone, or whether we see our differences as disqualifying or dangerous, or the very thing that will divide us from realizing who we are individually, living to our full potential, or as a country, living to our promise. And what this moment is about, never mind this campaign, is just how you and I and America is going to answer this open question. Now, in my hometown of El Paso, Texas, and in our sister city of Ciudad Juarez, this is the community in which I was raised. The community where Amy and I are raising our 3 kids. Ulysses, who's 12, Molly, who just turned 11, Henry, who is 8 years old. A quarter of those with whom we live were born somewhere else. And the way that I look at it, they chose us, they chose this country. They left their hometown, their homeland, their family, far too often their language and their culture as well, to start anew as strangers in a strange land, to do better for themselves and their family, just like you want to do better for yourself and your family. But also, they were called to do better for all of us, inspired by this country and this ideal to which we aspire. And their very presence has made us stronger and more successful and safer than we would be otherwise. El Paso, Texas, one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because it's a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the world over. They made us better. They made us greater. They made us America. My wife Amy was not originally from El Paso, and in fact, I met her when she was first coming through El Paso after having spent a year in Guatemala teaching school. Her aunt called me up, and this was the era before Tinder, 15 years ago, and said, "Hey, my niece is in town, would you mind taking her out?" And I said, "I'd love to." And I went to her house, the place that she was staying at, picked her up, drove her to downtown El Paso, parked the car, and we walked over the Paso del Norte Bridge to Ciudad Juarez. Walked down Avenida Juarez into the Kentucky Club, the world-famous Kentucky Club, where they purport to have invented the margarita. And who am I to argue? We had a margarita there, and I like to think that at that bar that has stood the test of time, that's been there for more than a century, that is the bar where Elizabeth Taylor drowned her sorrows after her first divorce. She was married to Nicky Hilton. They honeymooned in El Paso, Texas. I'd like to think that she spent some time there. I'd like to think that that's where Bob Dylan wrote Tom Thumb's Blues, which begins in the streets of Juarez. Maybe that's where Johnny Cash bought the drugs that he was busted for when he crossed back into El Paso, Texas a little bit later. We had our drink, we walked down Avenida Juarez to the old customs house. Important scene in the Battle of Juarez during the Mexican Revolution, and it was also in 1912 or 1910, the first place that the presidents of the United States and the Republic of Mexico ever met, Taft and Diaz, and neither of them needed a translator because each of them spoke both English and Spanish. They repeated that meeting on the El Paso side of the border, and Taft literally broke the chair that he was sitting on. They saved the splinters and the pieces at the Chamber of Commerce. We walked over to the Placita in front of the Mission of Guadalupe that has been there for 330 years. And Amy and I sat down on this park bench and we just took in the sights and the sounds and the smells, the music, the people dancing, the elote that they were selling right there. And that was the beginning of our romance, which turned into our marriage, which has produced these 3 kids in the city that I love more than almost anything else, with the exception of that family and our kids. And it was to that place, 2 weeks and a day ago, someone drove more than 600 miles, fueled by hatred and racism and fear that he had been taught to feel. From a president who described Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals, though they commit crimes at a far lower rate than those who are born in this country, who repeatedly warned of an invasion. Y además, he sent the United States Army more than 5,000 service members to our community to face what? Kids who had traveled 2,000 miles, fleeing the deadliest countries in the world, bar none, on foot atop a train known as the Beast or La Bestia, showing up vulnerable and desperate and defenseless. Described them as an infestation, as predators, as killers. And as Greg mentioned, he put them in cages. And under his watch over the last year, we have lost the lives of 7 innocent children. And right now, we have the largest mass incarceration of children who have committed no crime since the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And to a person, we'd all like to think, if I were alive at that time, if I had a voice in the democracy of 1942 and 1943, I would have used it, I would have stood up, I would have been counted, and I would have stopped it. And yet despite all of this, in this great democracy, given what the president is doing, he's been able to continue this hatred, this invitation to racism and to violence, because in May of this year, at a rally in Florida, when he was warning of this invasion, asking, how are we going to stop these people? Someone in that crowd yelled out, shoot them. The crowd roared their assent. The president smiled his consent. He laughed. He said, this is okay in America. 22 people killed, dozens more grievously injured, in a city that on average loses 18 people a year to murder over the course of an entire year. Gentleman used an AK-47. His mom was bewildered when the gun came in, called the police in Allen, Texas, and said, what in the hell does my son need with a weapon of war? He's not in the military. He has no training for this. The police responded, ma'am, nothing we can do about it. This is perfectly legal in our country right now, despite the fact that we lost nearly 40,000 of our fellow Americans, each one of them a human being last year. No developed country comes even close to the carnage that we see in the United States of America. It is as though we've accepted it as our fate, our fortune, and even our future for our kids. Kids like mine who are scared to go into school on the first day of 3rd grade or 6th grade or 7th grade, as Henry, Molly, and Ulysses were 2 weeks ago, Monday. And yet in the face of that inaction, in that racism that has always existed and flowed through the history of this country, but now can do so in the open under this president, we saw that act of terror in El Paso. And here's one of the things that it taught me. No matter how beautiful and exceptional and special and safe your community, we are all connected to one another here in the United States. Martin Luther King talked about being caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And that violence in America, that racism and that hatred, it found us on August 3rd in El Paso, Texas. But I want you to know this as well. I'm confident that my community, this country, will not be defined by that act of terror. Instead, we will be known for how we overcame our triumph in the face of adversity and cruelty and hatred. and trauma surgeons and nurses and custodial staff at the 2 hospitals that the victims were brought to, dropping everything that they were doing during their day to be there for their fellow El Pasoans and Guarenses and Chihuahuenses, folks from both sides of the border. Didn't matter, they were human beings first before they were anything else. Some of them also working at William Beaumont Army Medical Center, trained as combat doctors, and telling us that the wounds that they saw in El Paso, Texas were like those wounds that they saw on the battlefield in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they did everything they could to save the people who came in, and they saved so many of their lives. The cleaning crew, that custodial staff that I'm talking about, when one patient was wheeled out of the trauma bay, they would rush in like a NASCAR pit crew and clean it up and have it ready for the next one in no time flat. Everyone doing everything that they could. Lines around the block at the blood donation centers. Everyone wanting to give every ounce of themselves to help their fellow human beings. The vigils, the funerals in Juarez in El Paso, Texas, attended by so many people. And at this memorial, makeshift, set up just outside of that Walmart where the act of terror took place. 22 crosses, each of them white, in black, painted the names of the victims. And one night, a few days after August 3rd, I went there. Hundreds of people out. Mariachis were singing, priests were praying, the matachines were dancing. And this chaplain who'd driven all the way from Alabama to be in El Paso to help us out recognized me and brought me over to a grieving husband. His name was Tony, and he was kneeling on the asphalt in front of Margie's cross. And he had Tony stand up, and he said, "Tony, please tell Beto about Margie." And Tony, who I could tell was grieving, was painfully shy, had just been devastated beyond my imagination, had the grace and the kindness to tell me about Margie. And then the chaplain turned him around, he said, "These hundreds of people who are here, Tony, they're here for you. Tell all of them about Margie." And he did. And then the chaplain asked each of us, after praying with Tony, to hug Tony. And person after person came up and hugged Tony. And when you hugged him, you felt everything that he was feeling right now. He felt all the love that you had for him. This week, there was published in the El Paso Times a notice for a funeral. Margie Record, Tony's wife. And the funeral notice said that because Margie and Tony were not originally from El Paso, had just moved here, did not have family or friends or a network, they didn't expect anyone to come out, and it was open to the public. Well, Friday night, the night of the funeral, I'm driving from Jackson, Mississippi to Little Rock, Arkansas. A text comes in from my wife, Amy, who had planned on visiting the funeral. And it is an image of her place in line, where she's been waiting for the last 4 hours to get into the church. First dozens and hundreds, then thousands of people came out to be with Tony in his moment of grief. That's how we're going to define ourselves as a community and as a country. We're going to be there for one another, no matter what the cost. And we're going to connect the dots for our fellow Americans. We're going to say that the president's racism, his hatred, the white supremacy that he espouses, it does not just offend our sensibilities. It fundamentally changes who we are. On the day that he signed the executive order seeking to ban Muslim travel to the United States, and just put that in perspective, when in the history of Western democracies has one leader of one country said that one people of one religion are inherently defective or dangerous or less than human? The mosque in Victoria, Texas on that day is burned to the ground. Hate crimes in this country on the rise every single one of the last 3 years. Those counties that hosted a Trump rally, hate crimes up 200%. You don't put kids in cages until you've been given permission to treat them as something less than human. Animals and infestation was the word that the President of the United States of America used. And then this murder, this killing, this act of terror in El Paso. So it is not enough, ladies and gentlemen, not to be racist in this country. We have to be anti-racist in this country. We have to shut down white supremacy, domestic terrorism, white nationalism, and call them out for what they are. And then we must go to those places and to those people who are being terrorized by this president. 2 days ago, I was in Canton, Mississippi, site of the largest single-state workplace raid by immigration and customs enforcement in the history of this country. Nearly 700 people for the crime of working in a chicken processing plant. Some have been here for 15, 20, or more years, working $8 an hour. Some paid less, some not paid at all. Their immigration status used as leverage against them, keeping them in some kind of modern-day bondage in this country. Moms right now locked up in jail. Their 4-month-old children who were breastfeeding, distraught and in distress. The mother depressed beyond our imagination. Her breasts swollen and in pain because she can no longer feed her child in this country. The terror of that president has struck into the hearts of those families in this country. Workplace raids, ICE enforcement, internal removals up tenfold under this administration. And it is all of a part. The invasion, the infestation, the troops on the border, the kids in cages. There is a war on some people in this country. The best way to meet that is not only to defend those who are being attacked, though we must, but it is to elevate them and make sure that they are no longer second class in this country. They have worked so hard to improve. And you know what that means? At a minimum, we rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, in our own values. We legalize the people who are here. We free dreamers from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens. We never page another child, and we reunite every single separated family. And as Greg reminded us, we acknowledge the full story of this country. That it was founded literally on the backs of those who were kidnapped, transported, enslaved, and whose descendants were denied any share in the success and the wealth and the greatness that they built, whether it was through Jim Crow, or redlining, or segregation, or suppression. That is alive and well in America today, where there is 10 times the wealth in white America that there is in black America, where there is 5 times the chance that a child of color in kindergarten will be disciplined or suspended or expelled as a white child in front of the same teacher for the same infraction in the same country. Where we have a maternal mortality crisis in America that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. So whether you look at the economy, or healthcare, or education, or the fact that Texas ranked 50th before 2018 in voter turnout, not because we love our democracy less than you do here in Oklahoma, but because if you were black or Mexican American, you were drawn out of your congressional district to suppress your vote, to silence your voice. If we are going to be up to this challenge, no more pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No more pretending that because we elected a black president, this is no longer a racist country. We must be focused on repairing the damage done and ensuring that we do not visit this injustice on future generations. That means, as president, I will sign into law Sheila Jackson Lee's reparations bill so that we tell the full story of this country, bring everybody in, and ensure everyone stays in going forward, a country for every single one of us. And then let's acknowledge this. If we fail to make progress on every issue of importance to every American, beginning with their dignity as human beings, we have every chance of losing them to demagogues like Donald Trump, who will channel that anger and frustration at our government's dysfunction, not on those who hold positions of public trust and power, but against immigrants, against the defenseless, against the most vulnerable in our communities. So that means, in the wealthiest country on planet Earth, No more wondering. You're going to be able to see a doctor, take your child to a therapist, afford your prescription. Guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care for everyone. That means primary health care. And take this from a perspective of a Texan, where the largest provider of mental health care services in my state is the county jail system. The largest inpatient provider is the Harris County Jail in Houston. It also means mental health care. And if we're going to address that maternal mortality crisis, universal health care also means every woman makes her own decisions about her own body. That we make sure that no one is a stranger to the greatness of this country. They're not outside looking in on the success that others enjoy. It means that when you work a job, you're paid a living wage, so you don't have to work a second or a third job. It means when you are a public educator, we treat you with respect for taking care of our kids, for being an example of community, for rewarding you for your public service, for letting you clean your student loan debt so you can focus on raising the next generation of great Americans. And it means that we pursue justice for everyone. Now we know, in Texas, we know in Oklahoma, we know across this country, that Native women are being murdered and are missing at rates that are 10 times the average in this country. Precious little resources being expended to find them or to bring their killers to justice. That means that we spare no expense, move any mountain, do whatever it takes to make sure that every American, wherever you live, feels safe in their own country, in their own home, in their own community. And that we also acknowledge that we have nearly 2.5 million of our fellow Americans locked up right now as we enjoy our freedom, our democracy, our beer. It's the largest prison population on the face of the planet, disproportionately comprised of people of color, including many serving time for the offense of possessing something that is legal in more than half the states in this country, to which you will not become addicted, from which you will not die or overdose. So in addition to legalizing marijuana in this country federally, we must expunge the arrest records of everyone arrested for marijuana in this country. We must end cash bail in this country, end for-profit prisons in this country, and make sure that there is justice for everyone in this country. Last time I was in Oklahoma, it was just after some devastating storms and some devastating floods that followed. And whether you're here in this community, or whether you're from Houston, Texas, which in 2017, in one storm, saw 58 inches of rain, the landfall record for a storm in North America for as long as we've been keeping records in North America. The drought in California, followed by the fires in California. Floods, storms, droughts, sea level rise. This is not an act of God. It is not by Mother Nature. It is you, it is me, it is our emissions, our excesses, our inaction in the face of the facts and the science and the truth. The scientists, and God bless everyone who still believes in science 300 years. Those scientists tell us we have 10 years to get this right. That is all that is left to us, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, not even as Americans, but human civilization on this planet. To free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, to fully embrace renewable energy, wind and solar, and the high-paid, high-skill, high-value jobs that come with wind and solar. It means backing our farmers, our ranchers, and our producers, and paying them a profit for producing environmental benefits for us, planting cover crops, that pull more carbon out of the air and sequester more of it in the soil. Every single one of us doing all that we can for one another and for the generations that follow. If we can show up and deliver, I guarantee you, not only will we save this country, but we will produce a majority of Americans who are focused on progress, investing in communities and people, ensure that we realize that ideal. We realize that more perfect union. We live to our full potential and our full promise. I'll close with this. Many of you helped us when we were running for Senate in Texas. We traveled to each one of the 254 counties. We went to the reddest counties, not in the state of Texas, but on planet Earth. You can see Abilene glowing red from outer space as you're orbiting the Earth. Went to King County, which voted for Donald Trump 96% in the last election. But I hope you agree with me. The folks in King County are every bit as deserving of our respect, of our showing up, of our listening to them, learning from them, fighting for them, and serving them. And we have no hope of doing that if we have not shown up for them first. One of these places was Silverton, Texas. And I was talking about the need to invest in infrastructure, and specifically broadband internet. Half of rural Texas cannot get online. Try starting a business, getting your crops to market, finding a date on Tinder if you cannot use the internet. And before I can finish, this guy stands up, older gentleman, and he says, Beto, I was in first grade in 1937, and I can remember well, Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt partnered with my community through something known as the Rural Electrification Administration. Now before that, my town had no electricity. I could not read by electric light before the first day of first grade. But when they showed up for us, and they partnered with our community, and they told me I was just as important as any other kid, whether he be in Chicago or Tokyo or London. He said, not only were we a better town, not only was I better for it, but he said, you can better believe my daddy was a yellow dog Democrat every day after that. So, let's make this commitment. We are going to show up for one another. We are going to deliver for one another. We are going to beat Donald Trump in November of 2020.